Hi, I welcome you to today's reflection on the channel. We are on chapter 4 of the book, The Principles and Benefits of Change by Dr. Myles Munroe. Today we are looking at the theme protection against change. In the previous chapter, we looked at responding to change. And so, in today's reflection, we want to learn some of the key things that we can pick from the chapter 4 on protecting ourselves against the inevitability of change. The inevitability of change. Now, the chapter begins with a key quote from Thomas Hardy, and it says that time changes everything except something within us, which is always surprised by change. And so there's this thing about us as human beings that despite our knowing that different things can happen at any time, based on the experiences we've had in growing and seeing the changing seas that come along, the troubling times that we go through, the sudden changes that happen, and in recent years, the COVID-19, how it came and how it distorted a lot of things, have taught us that things can change at any time with us, within us, around us, and we need to be able to understand that change, as it were, is inevitable. And this is something we have established over time in the first three chapters of the book. But it is quite interesting that although we have this knowledge that change can happen, things can happen at any time that will cause our plans, for instance, to be distorted, we always get surprised when things change. And so, change in itself, though inevitable, always comes to us as a surprise. And because of this thing, it is important that we prepare ourselves so that we can safeguard ourselves against disappointment and frustration. So the sub theme for the chapter is safeguards against disappointment and frustration. So we'll get to explore some of the key steps that we can take to counteract the negative effects of the unanticipated. And that is the purpose of the chapter. Now, there's a story or an account given of a Swiss watch company, which was a world leader in the world of watch manufacturing at some point in time. And this Swiss company had a researcher, a young researcher in the company, who one time came up um, with a new product line. And so moving from a motorized, watch to an electronic model, um, that could, spark a new era of watches. And he had the opportunity to present his new invention, which he had done with a number of his colleagues, to present this at a special, board meeting. Now, when he presented this new product line, the electronic based watch, the members of the board who were present found it interesting and filled with potential. So they didn't, belittle the fact that this was an amazing invention. However, they failed to patent this electronic model that their young researchers had come up with. And that is because they felt that as leaders in the world of watches, their way of doing things, their method, the kind of watches they were producing were good enough, were the best. And definitely, they were on top of the world in terms of watch production because their watches were good. However, a year later, when they decided to display this new electronic model, two representatives of two other companies noticed this electronic watch, and they all, went their way and decided to also come up with prototypes. And their prototypes that they came up with, became a certain competition to the Swiss company who had their young, researcher coming up with this electronic model a year ago. So the competition that came, the fact that this electronic model had now taken over the market, and the other companies, had started producing in good quantities, and all that made it difficult for the Swiss watch company to have a hold of the market as they could have done if that invention was prioritized a year before. And so they struggled on the market, and they had to terminate a lot of their employees' appointment, and they went into a tough season as a company. Now, there's a key statement here that the invention of the electric watch signaled a new season, a glimpse into the future, but a century of success had blinded the Swiss watch company's executives to the impending, inevitable reality of change. So they saw the promise in this new product line. They saw that this was something that was interesting. This was something that was amazing. But because they had years and years of success, they forgot to understand that change could happen at any time. So they couldn't see the impending, inevitable reality of change from a motorized watch to an electronic based watch. And before they could realize, the marketplace had become so much saturated with a new reality that one of their own had anticipated and actually initiated. So the company board thought its manufacturing method was the only or best way to make a watch. It assumed that past success guaranteed future profits. And that is something that many of us, struggle with. We believe or feel that there's this assumption that we have, whether consciously or unconsciously, that because we have been successful in the past using a particular method, that method will take us far into the future. Things will change, dynamics will change, and it is important for you to embrace the fact that the successes of your past glories, may not guarantee that your future would be glorious. It takes you to be able to manipulate, the new seasons to suit your talents, to suit your potentials. You are able to control how change is affecting you by taking advantage of new opportunities for progress. And so the story of the Swiss company is a lesson for all of us. It says, and ignoring a season of change can cause us to forfeit our God-given purposes. He who fails to expect, plan for, embrace, and oversee change will regret his past in the future. I think this is a very important quote to bear in mind. He who fails to expect, plan for, embrace, and oversee change will regret his past in the future. And this is why it is important for us to safeguard ourselves against this regret of our past in the future. If we are not prepared for what the future holds for us, it will be difficult for us to manifest our full God-given potential and fulfill his purpose for our lives. And so we get to see some key things that we need to understand as we safeguard or protect ourselves against change. The first thing is that the present has a life shelf. The present has a life shelf, or the present has a shelf life. And by shelf life, what it means is that the present moment, the here and now, is not forever. The here and now has a point where it will end. So it must come to our attention that what we have now, what we are now, is not permanent. It is only temporary. Things will change. Dynamics will change. So just as there are expiration dates on foods, medicines, and other products, so must we be aware that there are expiration dates to what we are or what we are doing now. So if you are in school, there is a shelf life to your time in school, whether at the graduate level, the undergraduate level, or you are taking a professional course. It has a time limit, and you must understand this principle that time, that limit to your time that you have in that here and now, can be taken advantage of for your good, or it may be against you. So just as every product has a shelf life, the present has a shelf life. Again, the way you currently think and what you are currently doing will change over time, at least to some degree. And that is true. So I was having a conversation with a friend, and we were discussing how, the way we think will change. How we used to think about certain things have changed. The things that we used to have interest in may have changed over time. Not entirely, but there would have been some changes here and there, minor changes or significant changes. So things are changing about your preferences, your ideals, the things you prioritize, and the things that you deem not so important. They keep changing. And that is because for whatever thing we have or whatever thing we are, there is a shelf life to it. So if how you were thinking when you were in primary school is the same way you are thinking now, then it means that you are not growing. Then it means that there's a problem, there's a challenge that needs to be addressed. So there's always a way that our life is being changed, from the possessions we have to the things we get ourselves engaged in, the friends that we have, our associations, the work that we do, how we do the work, and all that. There are always changes that are happening. Our belief systems keep changing. So the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the verse 11, he says that when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. So there's a time where you are a child and you will think like a child, and you would understand as a child, and you would speak as a child. But there is a time that should come where that childishness is left behind. Now that you become a man, you are supposed to put away the childish way. So there has to be a certain understanding that we have that life in itself has a time to whatever we can do or we need to do. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 from the verse 1 tells us that there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. a time to mourn and a time to dance. So there are times and seasons for everything. And if you understand this principle of having a shelf life for everything in the present, you will be able to anticipate change and protect or safeguard yourself from the disappointments or frustrations that may come because change has happened. The point number two is that you need to guard against taking offense. So Jesus in his earthly ministry, in his earthly walk, he understood the effects of change and the importance of anticipating change. So he mentions in John 15, the verse 20, and John 16, the verse 2, telling the disciples that, you know what, there will be tough times that will come. There will be persecutions that you will face because you cannot be better or more than your master. You cannot experience anything different from your master. So the same way have been persecuted, they will persecute you as well. So there is a time coming where they will think of killing you because of your service to God. And he gives them, a picture of what will happen in the future in Luke 21, the verse 10 to 13, and the verse 16 to 19. He talks about how nation will arise against nation, talking about the end time, giving them a picture of the terrible things that will be happening. And he wasn't doing this to scare them. He was doing this to prepare them in their mind, to keep themselves from being frustrated when those things happen. So the fact that he was talking about the negative things that will happen does not mean that he was telling them to not have faith. Yes, he had told them they would do greater things than he himself did if they believe. And he had promised them that they will receive power when the Spirit of God comes upon them, and they will be witnesses of him in Jerusalem, in Judea, in Samaria, to the uttermost part of the earth. But he also made sure that he pointed them to the times that will come that will be terrible, the times that will come that will be, very frustrating, and so that they can guard themselves against feeling offended when those times come. So it says that the principle of change assures us that good times won't continue forever. So we must be prepared to avoid the trap of offense, so that when we see things going bad, when we see bad things happening to us, though we are good people, we will not take offense, particularly against God or against other people, because of those tough times that have come to us. It is easy to take offense when things don't go your way. But if you know that change can happen, and that good things don't always happen to good people, and that good times don't always last forever, it will help you to safeguard yourself and protect yourself against change. The third key thing to bear in mind, according to the chapter, is to avoid holding on too tightly. This one seems to be, as it were, a pessimistic way of thinking to some, but it is an important tool to have, so that when change happens that is not in your favor, you will not be so devastated. Luke 12:15 says that man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions, meaning that there is more to life than one's possessions. Floods happen and many people lose their possessions. Terrible disasters happen and many people lose their lives and their livelihoods. So there's more to life than the possessions. although the possessions are important for our survival. So, having in mind that not everything we have is the value of our life. Like our possessions are not what is the measure of who we are or our value in life is very important. So that you cannot base your personal value on anything you have received. Because once you do that, it says that you will lose your value when you no longer have it. So for some people, we are holding on so tightly to some particular person. It's like our whole life is dependent on what that person can do for us. And so on the day that that person is not able to help us, we feel devastated. We want to give up on life. We want to, you know, go even to the extent of some wanting to kill themselves or commit suicide because the one that they placed all their hope on has disappointed them. Some people in relationships have become so glued onto the expectation that this person will marry me, this person will never disappoint me, this person will, and because of that holding on too tightly, the shock of being disappointed by that person gets them so depressed and puts their life in a certain this comfort that takes a long time to heal from. So when we are conscious of the fact that we should not base our life solely and tightly on certain possessions that we have, it will help us to keep ourselves, safeguard ourselves against disappointments and frustrations that come from change. So again, it says we are protected against change when we don't automatically expect to keep everything we currently have, whether in terms of material possessions or friendships or whatever it is. If we are able to have in mind, bear in mind that we don't have to automatically expect that everything we have to keep it or we will always keep it. So it says in this way, we won't be shocked and thrown off course if they go away either temporarily or permanently. So avoid holding on too tightly. Avoid holding on too tightly. There are some people that have held on so tightly to a certain, promise that they fail to live their own lives and prepare themselves for the inevitable. And so when the time came for them to get that promise fulfilled and they were disappointed, it's like their whole life came crashing down. People have thrown all their investments into a particular, um, investment package, and when disaster struck and those financial organizations went bankrupt or certain things happened, it's like they lost all their investment, all their life savings in that particular scandal or that particular financial crisis that happened. So the prudent thing we are made to understand is that we shouldn't keep all our eggs in one basket, because once you hold on tightly to one basket, believing that all your hope and all your expectations will be fulfilled in that one basket, trouble will come when that basket is taken away, or that one basket faces a disaster. So we can't count on everything being the same at all times. We can't count on all our possessions staying the same and staying in our hands at all times. It is good, it is nice, to believe that everything will maintain itself everything we have, we will never lose it. It is important. This is not a call for you to become pessimistic or suspicious in living, but it is important to safeguard yourself, safeguard your heart, safeguard your mind against the frustration and disappointment that can knock you down if change happens and you do not anticipate it. It is a call for you to realize that nothing is really permanent. Even the life we have is not permanent. You may live, people live to 100 years and many years, but at the end of the day, they still die. There are people that are very strong, very energetic. By the time comes and a certain sickness knocks them off their feet and they become very feeble. So things can happen. Things can happen against our expectation, against our hope, against our faith that all will always be well with us. Things can happen that do not go well with you. And so anticipating that anything can happen is a powerful tool or an important tool that helps you to not hold on too tightly to certain expectations and certain possessions. So those are three key things that we need to bear in mind as we attempt to safeguard ourselves against the frustration and disappointments of change. We'll end the chapter with two key principles that are given for protecting ourselves against change. And these two key principles are: number one, that the greatest source of disappointment in life is the expectation that things will remain the same. And this is what we have mentioned all along in this evening's session. The fact is that although we have this expectation that things will always remain the same, that is not the truth. That is not the truth. There are things that will change. There are things that will happen that will change the dynamics of your life, will change the dynamics of your relationships, will change the dynamics of your job, your business, and you must be in the position to know that all these changes are part of what makes life what it is. So things will never remain the same. If your expectation is that things will always remain the same, you will not be able to make progress. And like the Swiss watch company, who weren't able to take advantage of the new invention of their young researcher, you will not be able to take advantage of novel opportunities that you can cause to work out in your favor as an initiation of change. The second principle is that our safeguard against disappointment and other negative reactions to change is the anticipation of change. So having an expectation that change will happen. So principle number one is saying that we are almost always disappointed in life because of the expectation that things will remain the same. And so to counteract that disappointment, it is important for you to understand that the anticipation of change is what will keep you or safeguard you from the disappointments and frustrations that accrue from change. So we must expect change continually. That is the basic thing that we need to do in order to keep ourselves safeguarded from change, particularly change that is negative, change that is not, in line with our expectations for the future. And it says that God will not allow anything to come into your life that you cannot rise above with his help. So God is always able to help us to overcome any change that happens in our lives, including changes that we are afraid of, changes that we feel are going to distort a lot in our lives. God is able to help us to rise above those changes and be able to make those changes a part of our lives, and something that works for our good. The scripture says that all things work together for our good. All things work together for our good. So changes that are negative, changes that are not in line with our expectations, all those changes can also work for our good, so long as we anticipate change and we understand that it is part of what makes our life worth living. So it ends with, you must become so stable through anticipating and preparing for change that you can outlast every change. Preparing for change, anticipating change. You may not know exactly what change will come, but if you take note of patterns, if you take note of things that happen around you, so that you know that, just like the Swiss company should have done, that the electronic watch may soon become what the marketplace needs. If you are able to anticipate that, you can take the necessary steps to ensure that you prepare yourself, you take the actions and do the things that will help you to survive the changes that will happen in the next few days, in the next few weeks, in the next few years, and into the next generation. You will keep passing through changes on the way to your purpose, and in the end, it says that you will come out the victor. The chapter ends with a quote from Mary Engelbreit, and it says that if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change the way you think about it. So if we are to protect ourselves against change, then we must anticipate change so that we will not be disappointed or hold offense when change happens. And when there are things happening that you do not like, you have the ability to change it. You have the ability to cause it to be readjusted to suit you. And we have mentioned in the chapter 1 that we can initiate change. Change happens within us, around us, for us, against us, and we can also initiate change. And if you cannot change whatever is happening, then you can change your mindset about whatever it is happening. That is important for you to be able to survive the changing seas of life. Thank you so much for joining today's reflection. I hope you have picked something that will help you to survive and be a victor of change. Take care and stay blessed. Bye bye.